Guess you can all hear me. Cool, thanks. Yeah, so hi everyone, my name is Philip. I'm a designer. I work for a company called Mozilla on a product called Firefox that you might know. And I'm here today to talk about default settings, which I am fully aware is the most boring premise you have ever heard for any talk ever. Or are there any default settings enthusiasts in here? None so far? OK. Well, I wouldn't be either, usually, but actually I think they are hugely important and also quite fascinating. So let me start with a little story here. Last fall, late last year, I actually got a phone call from my boss, who is this guy. And he said, hey, we should really do some work on search in Firefox. And I asked him, well, what exactly is this about? Hello, slides. OK. And he said, well, I can't really tell you because I really don't know, but you should really fly to Toronto to work on this. It seems important. So as it happened, me and a couple of members of my team flew to Toronto and started working on what turned out to be the build-up to one of the biggest transformations in the history of Firefox so far. The transformation I'm talking about, of course, was a shift in strategy from Firefox using Google as our global default search partner and switching to a more diversified strategy of using multiple partners in multiple languages and multiple countries. And in the first iteration, that is Yandex in Russia, Baidu in China, and Yahoo in the United States. Now, one term I dropped there is default search provider, which is about as interesting in itself as default settings. And it's a hugely technical term, but essentially this is the website, the search engine that you're sent to if you type any search term into one of Firefox's search access points, such as the URL bar or the search field or one of the search boxes on the homepage. So that it is essentially a way of sending traffic to search providers and allowing you as a user to search more quickly. Now let's focus on the United States here for a minute. According to StatsCounter, the website that does all the market share analysis, between the moment we switched the default from Google to Yahoo in the United States and today, the market share of Yahoo has risen by 2 percentage points. And coincidentally, at the same time, Google's share dropped the same amount, and you can all draw your own conclusions from that. But what we can all agree on is that this was one of the biggest shifts in the search market in the past couple of years. And if you keep in mind that search is a multi-billion-dollar market, then that's quite a lot of money. Now, it is important to say here that this wasn't us saying, if you're in the US, just use Yahoo or go home. It was actually quite the contrary. You, as a user of Firefox, always had the chance to pick a different search provider, and you will always have that chance. But this is actually why I think that default settings are so hugely important. Because even though they are just settings, they are optional and you can change them, they create the reality for what most people will be using. They are in many ways the choices that others are making for us. And most people won't change them, so evidently they are incredibly powerful. Now, I do realize that this is obviously a room full of very well-informed people who make conscious decisions. But chances are that everyone here, including myself, has gone with the default just because it was convenient in other areas than search, probably, even unwittingly. So, for example, who here has ever written a document using Times New Roman? And this is a safe zone. I'm not going to tell anyone. So, OK, a lot of typography enthusiasts here. And of those people, who has actually done it because Times New Roman is the most amazing font ever created in the entire universe? Yes. Excellent. Okay, well, it's still a low percentage, but I applaud your honesty. So for most of us, this wasn't our choice. This was a choice that Microsoft has made for us when they decided that Times New Roman would be the default font in Microsoft Word on every PC. And unfortunately, they also made a bunch of other decisions about other typographic variables that made Times New Roman look really bad, even though it's usually a pretty good font. But let's say that you didn't want to use Times because it didn't feel modern enough. What would you choose in that case? Yeah, Arial. Yes, of course. But why would that be? Because Arial really isn't the default font at all in Microsoft Word, but still everyone was using it. So why is that? Now, I have my own hypothesis, and it is that this is the reason. Even if you passed the threshold of wanting to change something, of not rolling with the default, for most people, this was the first acceptable choice in their font list that they encountered and then just went by it. It was the first thing that didn't just completely suck in there. Which, of course, leads us to the question, how do we as humans make choices? And I have a very simplified answer here, which is twofold. First, we just don't. If we don't absolutely necessarily have to make a decision, if we can avoid it, we will avoid the decision. You probably have heard the term decision fatigue in the past. You probably have heard about experiments that have been carried out in supermarkets where they tested the relationship between a buyer's willingness to buy something, like, for example, jelly, and the amount of choices that they have. And it turned out that at a certain point, having a lot of choices just caused people to not buy anything anymore. So choice is really hard. And choice is something that we avoid if it is at all possible and if we are not really invested in the decision. Now, if we absolutely do have to make a decision, it's probably going to be the easy decision. And there are a variety of factors that play into this. There's the number of choices, like with the jelly experiment. There's the familiarity of choices. And there's availability, such as with Arial, where it was just the first thing that seemed good enough that popped up. So that means a lot of our decisions are actually based on heuristics. It is not the big decisions that we make really consciously, like which talks at Republica should I watch, or at Media Convention. It's more the tiny decisions that we make every day, that we make hundreds and hundreds of every day, like which socks should I put on, and which search provider should I use, and which font should I use. But this creates actually a really troubling dilemma. How can we design for choice, to preserve choice in a world where choice itself is actually something that is really hard for our users? And that is a problem that we have grappled with at Mozilla and are still grappling with for quite some time. So there is probably no single right answer here. But what I'd like to do is just show you what we did in the field of search to preserve choice, to give the users more options without overloading him and without forcing him into choices that he will just pick the worst option of. So our hypothesis is that choices just make a lot more sense when they are done in context. So if we can take the choice out of this disconnected realm of settings and put it more into content, more into the task of searching itself, then perhaps we can catch the user at a moment of intentionality and actually let him make a temporary decision as opposed to a permanent decision that is a lot easier and that causes a lot less fatigue. Now, it still makes sense to have a really strong and clear default because, again, most of the time we just won't make a choice and we don't want to and we probably don't have to. Otherwise, decision fatigue would probably just cause people to stop searching, which nobody wants, I guess. So at the same time, when we made the transition to Yahoo and Yandex and Baidu, we also rolled out a new interface for our search bar, which is the thing that most people search through in Firefox. And this is what it looks like. You have probably seen that if you're using Firefox. Now, when you start typing, then you see this popover, and hitting Enter obviously would search with your default provider. And you get search suggestions, of course. But what is really the interesting part is the thing down here. This is what we call the one-click search buttons. Now, what they do is you can click them, and then you do a search for your term with the engine that you clicked on, which is a really simple way of searching. And this actually, for the first time, gives our users the choice or the opportunity to do a search with any different provider without committing to a default, without committing in any long term, thereby decreasing the resistance to the change. So, for example, here I could search for Wombat both on Yahoo and on Google and on Bing, but also in very specific search sites like Wikipedia or Amazon. And just to answer the question that is on everyone's mind right now, I do not know why Wombat poops is the third most popular suggestion here. I don't know. You have to ask Yahoo. So from there, the idea was to actually take this one step further. And we did this by using a technology that has actually been around for a very long time, which is called OpenSearch. And what this does is it allows any website to specify itself as being a search provider or a search engine. And as I said, this has been around for a very long time, but it never really fit into the concept of a default search engine because there are so many sites you can search out there, but very few that you want to do most of your searches with. So with this change in the UI, we could actually do a lot more here. And this is what it looked like. If, for example, I went to a site like Dict, which is a German-English dictionary, then you would see this little green plus icon in the corner there. And if you click it, you get the option to add this site as a search engine. And from then on, I can search for Wombat or any other thing from anywhere in this dictionary. And again, this didn't make sense when we were forcing users to choose a default, to choose the search engine that they will be using most of the time. But by getting out of this idea of you only have one search engine, you only have the one thing that you search with all the time or most of the time, there was the opportunity to do more with more providers. So that's how we're trying to balance the convenience of having a really strong default and the power of choice in the case of search. And finally, let me close here with a Spider-Man quote, because who would not want that? With great power comes great responsibility. And choosing a default is a very powerful design decision. And this is true whether you have hundreds of millions of users, or hundreds of thousands of users, or just hundreds of users. And even if we are offering options, our choice of the default might be the unwitting choice for actually most people who use our products. And whether this is about default search, or default fonts, or the default ordering of channels in a cable package, or anything, this is power in the hands of the designers. It is power in the hands of us who create systems for people to use. It is power that can be used, and it is power that can be abused. But it definitely is a kind of power that we must be aware of. And it is our responsibility to use it wisely. Thank you.
Philipp, thank you so much.